And welcome everybody to another episode of Fins Nation. This is one of the Behind Enemy Lines editions. So I am joined by Drew Gier. Is that how you say it? Drew Gier? Please tell me I said it right.
Yep. No, you nailed it. You're one of the few people who do.
Hallelujah. Phonics have not failed me. So this is Drew Gier of the Rockpile Report. He's going to be here as we do a preview of the Miami Dolphins' first matchup this season against the Buffalo Bills. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about it because this is maybe the first time we can say that this rivalry is actually a rivalry and it's not just a one-sided thing. It's been a very long time since we've been able to say that about these Dolphins and these Bills. So I'm going to be looking forward to that. We're going to have a lot to say. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention that, as always, this show is brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is the revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. Whether that's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, it's up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, Flex Friday specials where you can get your money back if you lose, or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. By the way, as you are listening to this, today is that Flex Friday, so make sure you're taking advantage of that. With offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you're any kind of a fantasy sports fan. So use the promo code 5, that's F-I-V-E, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Give us promo code 5, F-I-V-E, go to PrizePicks.com, deposit your $100, and let PrizePicks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with, and get started winning today. This show is also brought to you by the Biscayne Bay Brewing Company. Independently and locally owned, the Biscayne Bay Brewing Company is the only brewing company in downtown Miami. So if you want to go ahead and find a good place to watch the game, the Miami Dolphins are going to be playing on Sunday, and we are going to be there at Biscayne Bay Brewing Company. The 5 Reasons Sports Network is. So starting at 11:30 a.m., there is a watch party going on there. All you have to do is mention that you were with 5 Reasons, and the first beer is on the house. So that's all you got to do. They are the official lager of the Miami Marlins, as well as the partners of the Miami Heat. So go ahead and head on over there. We will see you there. Biscayne Bay Brewing Company, proud sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. All right. So, Drew, here is the situation that we find ourselves in. Right now, the Miami Dolphins are... I went ahead and I looked it up, and I honestly couldn't believe what I was looking at. I was looking at some of the power rankings during my last show, and there are some, not all, some outlets out there that actually have the Dolphins at the very top. Most of them have them right underneath the 49ers. There are still some that are keeping both the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the 49ers on top of the Dolphins. But one thing that is very consistent, and that's something that I've noticed, is that no matter where the Dolphins are, unless they're like at the top, right at the tippy top, right underneath the Dolphins is the Buffalo Bills. And this just seems to me that up until last season, even during last season when the Dolphins offense really started to take off, it was always the consensus that the Buffalo Bills were the favorites, the easy favorites to win the AFC East. They had Josh Allen, they had Stephon Diggs, they had a terrific defense, and now it feels like the odds have evened, if only because the Dolphins offense has reached a point where there are people talking about this as if this is the most prolific offense they have ever seen, at least through the first 3 weeks of the NFL. There's still plenty of time for things to go sour. I'm hoping that they don't, and I don't think that they will. But this is the first time that it really looks like this rivalry is actually a rivalry for the first time in God knows how many years, like over 20, 30 years.
Oh, I have it. I know, because I talked about it this week in my podcast. So back in 1991, when you think about when both the Bills and the Dolphins were last dominant football teams at what we'll call them is in this, since the 80s, both teams were at their peak. That stretch of the 90s, Marino and Kelly, 1991 is the only time that one team won both matchups. So you go from a 89 all the way through 95, that window where Kelly was still here, still playing football as a Buffalo Bill. And you kind of get into the later 90s, I think, before Kelly really left, but that was the peak. That was when we were competing for Super Bowls, constantly coming up against Miami in the playoffs, and those divisional games against each other carried weight. We always split. And the one thing that was consistent about it was that most of them were absolute shootouts. I mean, 1991, we win a game 35-31. 1992, it's 22-13. Buffalo loses in week 4. Oddly enough, we were playing them in week 4. And then went on week 16 to play you guys, and we won 47-34. Like, you're talking about 90s football. Those are pinball numbers. Like, now it's pretty feasible to think a team could score I mean, 70 points is absurd. Let's just get that out of the way. That's nonsense. That should never happen. And I loved the fact that some NFL owners there was rumblings that there was NFL owners who got frustrated and said that it seemed like you guys were quote unquote running up the score. These guys get paid. I'm sorry, this isn't Little Loop football. We're not out here handing out participation trophies. Those guys all got to cash a check for that. If they quit, that's their fault, right? It's not the Miami Dolphins' fault. Both of these teams are highly capable of scoring points, and that's what makes them dangerous. It's what makes this rivalry fun again, right? Because for the longest time, you'd watch the Dolphins, Bills fans like to throw it in Dolphins fans' faces about the streak. And then they talk about, oh, well, Josh Allen has his records 9-2 against you guys. Yeah, you guys didn't have a counterpunch. We had a quarterback. We finally found one. And it took you guys a while to figure out the right combination of coach and quarterback to put together a system that could move the ball effectively and on a consistent basis. And you guys are doing it in spades with this coach and quarterback.
I mean, I appreciate you being nice about it, but if we're being real, it took us a long time. Forget combination. It took us a long time to find either one of those things that you just referred to, a coach or a quarterback. So,
I mean, if I wanted to be mean about it, I could have brought up the fact that you guys lost to like multiple quarterbacks that Bills fans would tell you flat out are awful. You lost to Tyrod Taylor.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I remember Thad Lewis. Believe me, I remember Thad Lewis.
The Thad Lewis game might be the saddest one. Like, that's
both
the one
of them.
Both
of them. I remember both of them. It's like they put him in just to beat the Dolphins.
It's like that's a footnote. Like, that's a fantasy football, that's a trivia question out there someday about football. They're like, what obscure Bills quarterback that never started a full season beat the Dolphins twice? And everyone would go, I wonder who that is. Thad Lewis. Come on.
Who's that?
Who's that? What? Everyone has to run to Google. But no, it's nice. Elf Artiaga from 5 Reasons Sports. We talk about this all the time on our weekly AFC's Roundup podcast. It's fun that this rivalry is back because I will say this. I hated the Patriots after a while.
I still hate the Patriots.
I hate them, and I revel in their misery now, and I probably will for a very long time. Like, it'll be a long time before I don't dislike that franchise. I always, like, as a kid, I hated the Dolphins, but it had more to do with Brian Cox. I still remember Brian Cox giving our fans the finger, and then you guys won that game. And I remember saying to my dad at the time, because I'm a kid, I'm like, Dad, why don't they arrest that guy? And my dad just burst out laughing. He's like, that's not how that works. You don't get arrested for giving the finger. And then you guys went on to win. And I remember doing that thing where you go to your room as a kid, you squeeze a pillow and you have a couple angry tears. And I've hated Brian Cox my entire life. And I think that it's fun that this rivalry is back and it actually means something, not just in terms of my hatred for Brian Cox, but now in regards to actual football and the actual consequences of an NFL season.
Yeah, for real. And so now, as far as the game itself goes, all of a sudden, a lot of people are looking at this as if this is the first real test of the Miami Dolphins. Like, they didn't for some reason, and this is something I've never really understood. We can talk about the Broncos not being good, and we put up 70 on them, but I expect a team that is supposed to be vying for a Super Bowl to absolutely put the beat down on a bad team. I didn't expect it to be 70 points worth of one, but it was still what it was supposed to be done. And then as far as facing New England's still coached by Bill Belichick. He's still going to be able to know what to do on defense to some extent. And even then, it wasn't that the Dolphins weren't moving the ball. Raheem Mostert went ballistic on them. It was the only reason they didn't score 30 in that one is because Jason Sanders missed 2 field goals. And I am deathly afraid it's going to come down to a field goal in the Buffalo game, and I don't think we're going to win. So
Justin Sanders is struggling, man. But it's the natural evolution of older players. And I've said he's not that old, but I've said this.
But he fired his kicking coach.
Well, and I've said this to Elf before, having seen it with my own 2 eyes. You bring in, like, we brought in Dan Carpenter because we wanted a steady kicker. He was doing well elsewhere. We brought him in. He was good for about a season or 2. And then you noticed that over time, he started to lose his ability to kick from beyond 45 yards. You're no longer reliable from 45 to 55. So eventually, after a season and a half of that, he was out. And then they went and they brought in the kicker from Seattle, whose name is escaping me. He was Rex Ryan's last season. They bring in this other kicker,
Nick Folk.
No, Someone will. I'm sure there's someone listening to this who's screaming the name and they're like, I can't believe this guy doesn't get it. But they brought in another kicker, and again, same story, a little bit older, but was effective for about a season and a half, 2 seasons, and then all of a sudden he couldn't hit from beyond 45. And so instead of doing the retread thing where we kept finding another veteran kicker, the Bills gambled and went into the draft and ended up getting Tyler Bass, who's been worth the pick. He's worth the contract extension we gave him. It seems like the Dolphins are kind of at that point of the life cycle with Jason Sanders. He had a really, really stellar first year with the Dolphins, and he seems to have gotten a little bit shakier every season as he sticks around. And eventually, you guys are going to have to make a decision there as a franchise.
Oh no,
because
I am sure.
And it'll probably come after it costs you a big game, because that's what Stephen Hauschka, that was the kicker's name. And it was the same thing with Carpenter and Hauschka. It's fine right up until the day that it's not fine. And the day that it costs you a game, you're probably going to have a different kicker. Or at least the writing will be on the wall that there's a new kicker coming at the end of the season.
No, I'm pretty sure that the Dolphins already know that this next season is the out on Jason Sanders' contract. And it's not even that it wasn't even gradual. It was like 1 year he was literally a Pro Bowl, all-pro kicker, and the next he was awful. And I'm telling you, I was not kidding when he said he fired his kicking coach. His off-season kicking coach, Brent Gradlichov, who I had an interview with, and I actually talked to him about why Jason Sanders was so special, and he was able to like tutor him. He walked with him. He did everything with him. He did, and all of a sudden, I find out that after he tells, because I asked him, wait, what's going on, man? It's like, I haven't been working with Jason for a couple of years now. I'm like, really? When did that happen? And he told they told me that after the season that he was superstar, and the very next year, he found out, oh, I no longer work with him. That same season is the one that Sanders fell off a cliff. I'm like, oh, you don't say.
There you go. And see, it's weird how people go kicking coaches. This guy's an NFL kicker. What does he need a coach for? These little things, right? It's just like how long it's taken, certain position coaches. You look at how much Dante Scarnecchia meant to the New England Patriots for all those years. And then when he left, you look at what's happened to their offensive line, and they can't coach young offensive linemen anymore. They're drafting guys. They're doing what they always used to do. They're bringing in 3rd, 4th, 5th round guys and thinking, well, we'll just coach them into workable players. And they're finding out they can't, because they lost the Pied Piper. The guy who was doing all that coaching left. He's gone.
I still remember, I believe, that it was Dante Scarnecchia had actually retired once. And then after the first 4 games of the season, I can't remember which season it was. Might have been 2018.
They talked him out. They brought him back.
Brady dragged himself kicking and screaming, saying, you need to come back before I lose my career. And he did. And it was instant, almost miraculous. Yep. But anyway, this isn't a Patriots show. This is a Dolphins Bills show. I'm sorry.
Well, it is kind of cool because we do get the crap all over another team that's in our division, and we can both do it together. Like, if that's not bonding between fan bases, I don't know what is, man.
Hey, this is true. Yes, I mean, I don't want to. I need to be nice. I had Colby Fowler, who was another guy who came on for my Patriots show. I have to be nice.
Oh, I'm being
a journalist. Oh, you know him? Yeah, okay, there you go. So everybody knows everybody, and it's a small world. Mm-hmm. So now I want to go ahead and I want to get into what's going on with Buffalo right now. So obviously you guys have had some really impressive wins so far. The only thing is that some people, at least in the Dolphins fan base, obviously they're putting an asterisk on it. And I admit it, I'm somebody who has done a little bit of the same thing, because the teams that you guys have faced already, it's not exactly something that's wow worthy. I'm sure that a lot of Bills fans are saying the same thing about the Dolphins, looking at this like, oh, well, why should we be concerned about who you beat? You beat New England, who is not good because Mac Jones. You beat the Chargers. That's probably the only one that you could probably like, okay, you got to admit the Chargers. But in your case, it was the Raiders, Jimmy Garoppolo. Did Garoppolo even finish playing that game? I think he's on IR now. I'm not sure.
No, so Garoppolo finished playing that game. Howell somehow finished playing his game. If I was him,
9 sacks.
I would have benched myself at that point. I would have been like, Coach, I'm not going back out there. Not again. I can't do this anymore. We both are in the same boat. Both of our teams are in this thing, and I know it's obviously it's the NFL. Fans are fans. Everybody lives in a house of glass. We both have the kind of unfortunate situation where we haven't gotten to play a game against a truly worthy opponent, or at least on paper.
The Chargers, I think, though, for
the
Miami.
Chargers were, right? And I think it's one of those things where when you take into account the way that the Jets defensive coordinator seems to just know Josh Allen and have his number annually, you could almost argue that even without Aaron Rodgers, that game was always going to be a rock fight and an uphill battle for Buffalo because they just know how to get inside his head. It's not about the X's and O's. It's literally it's
Just looking at the
it's like a
gangrene
it's
gives him
a
the
psych-
shivers.
it's a psychological thing with Josh Allen. They bait him into some awful decisions, and like the one of the three interceptions he threw in that game, I remember he came to the line of scrimmage and his eyes were big like Goofy, like a big cartoon character. And I looked at my friends in the room and I go, he's about to do something ridiculous. And sure enough, he had Dalton Kincaid breaking wide open over the middle for 8 yards. And instead, he went for an 18-yard pass down the sideline to a triple covered Gabe Davis and threw an interception. I was like, see, they do whatever they're doing is rattling him, and he feels like he has to win this thing on his own. He's not playing in the system. He's a lot like you're seeing what happens when Tua plays in the system and the system works. Right now, the Dolphins are reaping the benefits of a Miami offense that is playing. It's in sync. Everybody has synergy. The quarterback has an understanding of what the coach has designed the plays to be. The wide receivers have the talent to get to spots. He can take a 3-step drop and just throw the ball to a spot and just trust that his playmakers are going to get there. That's what the Bills needed to do week one, and they had the play calls, but Gangrene has Josh Allen's number psychologically, and you watched it again, him just implode on the side of that mountain. So the same way that happened to us, you guys went into a game against the Chargers where you almost, first of all, I hate you guys because you roasted my fantasy team. You just let Austin Eckler set everybody's team on fire. And it almost cost you guys. You gave up 433 yards of total offense.
I was upset.
It was a gamble. But Fangio said, I'm not going to let their quarterback win. I'm going to make everybody else do the heavy lifting. And it almost cost you. Almost. Against lesser opponents, you guys did exactly what the Bills have done. You said, hey, these quarterbacks aren't special. Now is when we take away the ancillary weapons and we say, hey, you, lame quarterback, go win that game. And the results are what they are. So we're both kind of on a similar trajectory in terms of the quality of the opponents we've played and kind of the way they're designed, or at least the circumstances. So this really is both teams' first test, I think.
Now, I wanted to ask you guys about your pass rush because you mentioned Sam Howell, and yeah, Sam Howell was god awful in that game against you guys. But the thing that I was actually checking out, there was actually a next gen stat, and I don't know if I don't know if Alf mentioned it or all at all. Every single sack that y'all got against Sam Howell, he was holding on to the ball for more than 4 seconds. So he just didn't want to get rid of it. So
well, and so there's some nuance to that, and so I'll share this with you. There was a chart, Ben Baldwin, Computer Cowboy on Twitter. He always has those graphical charts that he'll put out, different obscure statistics, but they're interesting. Mm-hmm. So he produced a chart after week 3, 2023 cornerback separation allowed and target percentage. If you look at that chart and you look at the target percentage and who's getting targeted where and who's allowing the least separation in the NFL, the reason Sam Howell was holding the ball for as long as he was, the wide receiver with the most separation of any target on the entire team was Terry McLaurin, averaged 1.9 yards of separation, made him the 48th lowest grade for that statistic in the entire NFL last week. Our cornerbacks gave them no one to throw to. And Howell is a playmaker who, you saw it in that game that they came back and won against Denver. It was staying in the pocket and taking big hits, but he's delivering strikes down the field as guys break open. The problem is those guys didn't break open. Yeah. And when you go back and look, Teron Johnson, our slot corner, leads the NFL in the smallest amount of separation allowed and the fewest times targeted. Because cornerbacks are watching the coverage job he's doing and not challenging him. Christian Benford, our CB2, he's right there behind him. It's him, Greg Newsome. Sauce Gardner is allowing a little bit less separation than Christian Benford.
Well, that's because he's always grabbing somebody, but that's a different.
He's a dude. It's hilarious the way that guy clutches and grabs. Christian Benford plays the same style of game, and he gets away with a lot. I'm the first one to admit it. He gets away with a lot. And yet he's one of the least targeted cornerbacks in football because the quarterbacks worry about challenging him the way that he covers their wide receivers. It's weird when you see Trey White in the like at the high end, but kind of middle of the pack, and you see these guys standing out like that. These past couple weeks, we've really tuned up these opposing offenses, and it's because they don't have anyone to throw the ball to. They just don't. Like, I think I had the metric, it was like an hour. We went 1 hour, 35 minutes, and like 28 seconds. I know it was longer than the movie Coneheads. We Googled it. The amount of time that the Bills went without allowing an opposing point was longer than a feature length movie in terms of clock. And a lot of it hinges, people talk about the pass rush. Our pass rush is good. Floyd is a good pass rusher. He's a veteran. He's kind of savvy. Greg Rousseau is playing really well at the start of the season. He plays more of a power rush game, but he's learned some moves. He's got a rip move. He's got a really nice swim move. He's big and he's long. He doesn't have a lot of burst, but if he can get to your tackle's shoulder with a little power, he can win. The problem is going up against an offense like Miami's that gets the ball out so fast. You'd think, and it has been so far for the season,
like
mitigating pass rush.
2.07 seconds before the ball's gone.
And this is how they're protecting Tua. They said, look, when Chris Gier was telling you guys all offseason long that he was comfortable with your offensive line, and fans were screaming on social media, which I love.
Too.
I love it. Nothing. I tell Elf all the time, you guys have one, like, for being hyperbolic Bills fans, Dolphins fans have one of the more unhinged social media fan bases. It's amazing to watch.
I mean, we had Tua on, so that by itself.
So, like, when Chris Gier kept telling you guys all to relax, this is why, because he knew that this is what the coach had in mind. An offense predicated around 3-step drops, but not just 3-step drops, West Coast style offense, 3-yard slant or a 5-yard slant. These are 7, 8-yard, 10-yard passes to a specific spot on the field that only their players are generally fast enough to get to. And it's working. It's kept Tua clean. Pressure hasn't been able to disrupt your offense. I think that the key for the Bills in terms of this football game and where you're going to see pressure get manifested is this idea that it's cool that you guys can avoid it schematically. And our pass rushers, Ed Oliver's having a great season. That's the other thing. On the interior of the offensive line, you guys might have some issues, and our D tackles are winning, consistently. Our pass rush win rates are fantastic. It's the coverage units that are going to amplify what they're capable of. And it's just the sticky nature of what they do. Now, we're probably not going to match you guys speed for speed. We get burned every time we try to do that. Like Jalen Waddle, do you remember last year when he had that pickup of, what was 3rd and 22? 3rd and 22, and it's just a drop in the bucket pass. He somehow just runs away from our safeties for a first down. It's one of the most absurd plays I've seen in the course of our renewed rivalry. But it happens because your guys are just faster than ours. Well, I think Sean McDermott, especially after last year's games where he's watched your wide receivers break into the open and find holes in the zone, you're going to see a lot more zone match play where it's got some man concepts to it just based on the way that they're breaking out so that it's a little bit stickier and it'll pressure Tua to be a little bit sharper when he throws into those windows and try to bait him into maybe your second read looks like it's open, but it's open because our safety's there. Matt Milano is kind of lurking. That's going to be the game that the coverage units play. And the more of that they move and shift around, they're going to do what they can to force him to hold the ball beyond this league leading, what did you say, like 2.8 seconds or 2.28 seconds?
2.07 seconds, I believe.
Jesus Christ. Woo! So that's where you're going to see this coverage unit try to help amplify the pass rush. The pass rush on its own would be fine, but it's because of the job the guys on the back end are doing. That's what's made them so successful over the first 3 weeks.
So, but now though is going to be Jalen Waddle, I believe, is going to be coming back. He's cleared the concussion protocol, so it's more almost guaranteed he's going to play. Tyreek Hill is now on a new level of understanding the offense, and even then, his first touchdown against the Denver Broncos apparently he ran the wrong route. I didn't even realize that, but apparently inside the NFL had like the mic'd up stuff, and so apparently Tyreek ran the wrong route, and Tua found him anyway, and he scored. So that on its own, I feel like that if the Bills try to play any man at any point, that's going to be like Tua's like, I got you. Like insert Kevin Harlan. He's got him all the way down the field.
Exactly. And that's why you can't play man. But at the same time, what teams get, you've been feasting on this all season long, is that if you just try to play a straight up zone, that's not enough physicality to disrupt the Miami offense. So you have to get cute. and you have to say, okay, we're gonna line up in a little off man, or like I said, you're gonna play a little zone match where you're like, hey, I'll play in a zone, but the second you come into it, now you're my man, and I'm gonna bump you a little bit inside this 5 yard window, and we're gonna lean on, try to introduce a little bit of physicality to the coverage. I expect, and you guys, your fan base is gonna be pissed. I expect to see a lot of clutching and grabbing. I expect to see our DBs. It's taking the old Richard Sherman tack of, listen, they're not going to flag us every play. They're just not going to flag us every play because that's what it's going to require. You guys have electric playmakers. They're smaller. They're not as physical. If we're going to slow it down, that's going to have to be the way they do it.
All right, and I want to talk a little bit about the Bills' offense because obviously Josh Allen is still going to be doing what he does. I've always been more scared. This is my opinion based on being a Dolphins fan. I've always been more scared of Josh Allen's legs than I have been of his arm. I've always felt like that Allen's accuracy is not like pinpoint. He can get it to his guys. He's not Lamar Jackson in that regard, but he doesn't always hit his target the way it's supposed to be done. But
is it funny that everybody, real quick, is it funny that everybody universally, if you're gonna talk about a quarterback who has physical talent but kind of sucks at throwing the football, it always somehow comes back to Lamar Jackson.
Because it's true, man. Like, I know that it's an unpopular thing to say, but Lamar Jackson is not the most accurate quarterback I've ever seen. I'll just say that. Like,
I love it.
If you leave them wide open, he can hit them.
Oh, I hear
obviously.
you. No, I've been off that bandwagon for a long time, back before he fell off the cliff, and it's just funny that universally among football fans, that's just where you go when you go, that guy's super talented, he just doesn't throw the ball that accurately. Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, it's the truth. But Josh Allen, in his case, he's physical. He's more accurate than Lamar Jackson for sure. But like you said, sometimes he gets baited into doing things that he's not supposed to. Now, obviously, last season we did the Josh Boyer concept, just blitzing him every time. That doesn't seem to work ever. It never
That's
works.
a bad idea.
Never
Bad
works.
idea, team. A lot of teams. Josh Boyer wasn't the first one to try and die on the hill of, I'm going to blitz Josh Allen all game long. It's like trying to climb Mount Everest. There's a lot of dead bodies up there.
Yeah, so I don't think. Now, here's the thing: Vic Fangio is very much the opposite. He's like we went from the most blitzes ever to like the least blitzes ever in the entire league. So I just based on what you've observed, what exactly is it the weak spot in Josh Allen's game? Like, I know you talk about gangrene, but we can't just change the jersey color for one game. It's not going to cut it.
No, but there's some concepts of what they do that I think are repeatable. It just depends on how you go about it. So when you look at what that team was able to do to Josh, and you look at the interceptions that he threw, and you look at why things went off the rails in that first week, 29-41, like I'm looking at his passer chart, 29-41, and when I look at it, he's got his spray chart. He was trying to force the ball into coverage and down the football field in an attempt to win the game on like seemingly every play. If you can get Josh, he feels pressure. And it's just this emotional, psychotic thing that he has.
It's not pass rush pressure. It's a mental pressure.
No, it's mental pressure. And what it comes down to is, and you got to think about who Josh is psychologically. Like I tried to explain this to a buddy of mine, and I think it opened his eyes to it a little bit. You're talking about a guy who didn't get any scholarships coming out of college, coming out of high school, finally got the offer from Wyoming. Went to go play for a Wyoming team where he was de facto the most talented football player on the field. Point blank period. Every game it was going to be him carrying the weight. And if he didn't play out of his mind, they lose that football game. He gets drafted by the Bills. 2018, his first season, he wasn't supposed to start, but Nathan Peterman sucked so badly. They were like, all right, scrap this plan at halftime. You're in for the rest of the season. It was a talentless team. They built that team to clear all the previous organization, ownership, GM and head coach cap situation. They took one season, took their medicine, cleared their cap. They had the second cheapest offensive line in football. I think the whole line made less than $19 million. I remember joking that they all got paid less than one season of Taylor Lewan. He had no wide receivers. He had no tight ends. So it got ingrained in his head, okay, I'm in the NFL, and every game, if I don't win it for us, we lose. And it kind of was that way right up until about 2020. And then the offense took off under Brian Daboll. Everything seemed great.
Stephon Diggs showed up.
Stephon Diggs showed up, but you still saw moments of it where Josh would have a rocky game. And, on a podcast earlier after we lost to the Jets, we went back and pulled all the recordings and the audio of his apology pressers after every one of those losses. They sound exactly the same. It's when he feels like he has to do more, whether that's because the opposing offense is scoring faster than he feels like ours can, whether it's because the opposing defense just seems like, hey, they're not scoring, but we're not, playing within the structure of the offense isn't working for us. I'm going to go rogue. And all of a sudden, you see him playing hero ball, trying to throw the ball into that 20 to 25 to 30-yard window downfield on a more consistent basis, trying to throw into double coverage because he trusts that he has arm arrogance. He assumes he can throw it into a tight window.
Oh, no, he's got a
beat
cannon,
double
so
coverage.
he has the right to think that way.
Sure, but then that's his undoing. And so, if anything, you want to talk about the weakness in his game, it's that if you guys can, it sounds counterintuitive a little bit because it has nothing to do with your defense. If your offense can come out and put points on the board quickly, you're going to watch Josh Allen start to sweat, and his decision-making and his choices in the pocket are going to get a little more erratic. And that's where you can derail what our offense has become. Because one of the things I'd warn you guys and your listeners on, your linebackers, right? I've seen some of the tweets. I've seen some of the reactions to, obviously, finally you guys put David Long in. You don't have Andrew Van Ginkel playing out of position anymore. So kudos for that. But your linebackers are, I want to say, would you say it's fair if I called them average NFL linebackers?
I would do you one better. I would say that they're the weakest unit on the entire team.
And
besides tight end, but I only say that because Durham Smythe is good. He's not great.
This is a problem for you guys because after week one and his ridiculous implosion, it was almost like he got grounded. In fact, I joked on our podcast that I called Ken Dorsey and Sean McDermott basically stepdads who are just impotent. They can't yell at Josh because Josh knows he's the most powerful person in the entire franchise. So they can't send him to his room. It's like, you can't punish this kid because when you do, he just looks at you and goes, "You're not my dad. You can't yell at me." And so going into week two, though, you watch Josh buy into what they wanted the structure of the offense to be. And you're watching what's happening to opposing linebackers. I have the stats here. Through 2 weeks, 17 targets, 13 catches, 116 yards, and 4 first downs, 82 yards after the catch just for tight ends. That's just for tight ends against linebackers. Then just in running the ball, against Washington this past week, we punished the A and B gaps, right? 6.2 yards per carry on 10 rushes in the A and B gaps. Against Vegas, we were beating him around the tackles because James Cook has a lot of speed, and it seems like his vision finally caught up to his feet. When we get outside the tackles, 6.6, 6.7 yards per carry, multiple first downs, multiple touchdowns. They've learned how to beat up the interior of a defense. And by and large, there aren't a lot of teams. Think about how the AFC is structured. A lot of teams with powerhouse offenses, not a lot of really strong linebacker cores.
That's a little, actually, you know what? That's a little weird.
So not a lot of strong linebacker cores. The Bills might have arguably one of the best still, even losing Matt Milano. Losing Tremaine Edmonds. So with that in mind, that's where you're going to watch this game probably get won or lost if you're the Miami defense. Your safeties are very good. But I also expect that your safeties are probably going to be committed to doing some work against our tight ends because our tight ends tend to have pretty good games against Miami by and large. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to do with the quality of your linebackers and coverage. I expect that Fangio is going to give them a little bit of help from the safety position in that regard. The question is, what does that open up elsewhere? What does that do when you've got Gabe Davis, who, like last week showed, was a perfect synopsis of this? Washington would not come out of their too high shell. And then they came down for one play. Josh saw Gabe Davis going over the top, threw it. It gets intercepted. It's an arm punt. It ends up on their 20. But he saw single high, saw Gabe Davis, and knows there's nobody big enough to compete with him down the field. And his hands are phenomenal. So he throws it up to him, or at least his hands are phenomenal in those situations. Throws it up to him, gets picked. A quarter later, they finally give us that single high look again. It was the same route, the same play, hits him for a touchdown. He'll take it the second you give that up. So you guys are almost obligated to play like a cover six or keep your safeties out of the box. And that's just going to open up as long as Josh doesn't get rattled and stays within the structure of the offense, there will be room for our tight ends and running backs to make plays. And so then it's just how do you guys rally tackle and what's your counterpunch to that?
It's going to be interesting because that's going to show how much faith Vic Fangio has. He talks about faith and trust a lot in his press conferences. It's going to be very interesting to see how much faith he has in Xavier Howard and Kader Kohu to get the job done, because I do think Kohu is going to be on the outside again. I don't think they're going to trust it to Eli Apple. I think that would be a terrible, terrible idea.
I've been looking forward to this game ever since I found out he signed with you guys. After all that shit he talked, after that game against since he came in here and kicked us in the teeth, all of the smack that he talked, I've been looking forward to this. I was like, please let Eli Apple. Please put him out there against Gabe Davis.
I don't think Vic Fangio is going to do that. No, I do not think he's going to do that. So, in any case, so we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap it up. But before we do that, just want to make sure we get our picks in. So I always do this. I always ask. And I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to do this with you as well. I do this thing called Zero and Hero, and I want to know, at least on your end of it, when I say who is your zero, I'm saying who's the guy that you think is not going to make much of an impact for Buffalo, and then obviously who's your hero, who's the guy that's going to be the make or break for the team to win, and then you make your pick.
Oh, hero and zero. So, I mean, I feel like it's low-hanging fruit for me to just like, oh, well, Josh Allen's the hero. Obviously.
Yeah.
If Josh Allen has a crap day, then there's not much to talk about. There's not a whole lot is going to go well for us.
Right.
I think the player that's going to make the biggest impact beyond Josh Allen in this game is probably James Cook. I think that James Cook's speed against that linebacker core and against your defensive backs. Your defensive backs are good in coverage. Again, you're talking about speed when you're already preoccupied with a Gabe Davis, with Stephon Diggs. And now you're talking about having to break off those routes and come back and try to tackle a quick running back who is very agile. He's small, but he's fast. He's got 4.4 speed, and he's finally been showing it. And his vision has allowed him to set up blocks, follow blocks farther down the field. It's how he's been able to churn out so many yards in just a very short span of time. And so with that in mind, I think that if he can get open both in terms of the passing game and get going in the rushing game, I mean, he's got 15 first downs through just the first 3 games. He's averaging 5 a game. He can be the thing that keeps us ahead of the sticks, keeps this thing moving, keeps the Bills' offense on track. And that's going to make Josh Allen feel more comfortable to make some of the more dangerous plays that he makes. And that's, I mean, those are the difference makers in football games like this. As far as the zero, the players that I think will probably make the least amount of difference, I'm going to go, I've got 2 of them, and I hate saying this because they've had a great season so far. I think it's probably going to be our defensive ends, if only because the way Miami sets up its rushing. That's how Miami's going to win this football game, mind you. I know that, right? It's going to be one of those Patriots things where it's like, look, defend the pass. We will crush you with our running game, which you guys are quietly doing very, very, very well. It's going to be this idea that it's probably going to be safeties and linebackers who are the most instrumental in catching up the motion that happens before a run play or a pitch out or a counter run to the outside. Or I just don't see our defensive ends with as quickly as the ball comes out of Tua's hand, even with our defensive backs playing good coverage. And also just in the way you guys structure your runs to the outside and stuff like that, I just don't know that our defensive ends are going to have a whole lot to do with the outcome of this game.
All right, and I think I know where you're going to go with it, but let's get your pick and your score.
My pick, well, it's funny because I hate the under-over in this. It's like 54.5. It's a lot of points. And I just feel like this game has the makings of something closer to the Patriots-Dolphins game than it does to some, the Monday Night Football game between the Rams and the Chiefs a few years ago where both teams almost had 50. I feel like it's closer to being that style of game. I think that I have a hard time picking these things, which is why I don't gamble on under-overs. But I'll tell you this, I think it's a field goal game. I just trust my kicker more than yours. So I'd say, do too. I think the same way the last game in Buffalo ended, I think it's going to come down to the wire and it's going to be a last minute field goal, probably from considerable distance from Tyler Bass to win it.
And you got a score?
If I'm going to say it, I'll just say I'll go 27-24.
That's scary.
27-24 with 2 Jason Sanders missed field goals.
Okay. Ouch. So, ironically enough, my 0 is going to be Jerome Baker. I just don't think that he's going to be able to have much of an impact. He's the quarterback of the defense, and I respect him for that, but he hasn't had much of an impact as far as actually playing defense as of yet. I don't think that today is the day he's going to be able to do that. My hero, and I think this is going to come down to it, I think that we're going to have to see another big game from Raheem Mostert. I think I picked a different hero. I think I might have picked Andrew Van Ginkel on defense and during Pulse of Fins Nation back on Tuesday. But the more that I think about it, the more I think that the offense is going to have to be what carries it. And I think that we're going to need another big game from Raheem Mostert, which is good because, again, he knows this offense front and back. He's been solid this entire time. He's not superstar running back. Obviously, he's not Christian McCaffrey. He's not Jonathan Taylor, but nobody really is. But for what this offense requires and what this offense asks of him, Raheem Mostert is doing more than what he's being asked to do. He's doing a phenomenal job. He needs to do another phenomenal job against Buffalo somehow if the Dolphins are going to win this game.
I agree with you, and I'll just expand on your point about Raheem Mostert. If you recall, he had 112 yards rushing the last time you guys played us in the first half, and your coach inexplicably moved away from the rushing game.
Yes,
in the second
that's
half.
an extreme frustration with Dolphins fans everywhere at that point.
And so, you can always look back, hindsight, you could look back and wonder what would have happened if he had just knuckled down and really committed to the run. It's like he came out, ran it 3 times, it didn't go well, and just said, okay, screw it, we're not running anymore.
Yeah.
If he had just stayed the course, maybe that game ends differently. I don't know. But I know that Mostert is a running back with a lot of talent. I think he's proven that he has a lot of ability. And I, as a fan, a longtime season ticket holder for the Bills, I just have a feeling about games like this when everyone goes, oh my God, this juggernaut passing offense. I go back in my mind to a game. It was 2012. It was the year after we beat the Patriots at home for the first time. We broke that drought, and it was like manna from heaven. So I rushed out and bought season tickets, thinking to myself, I'm going to get to watch us beat the Patriots once a year. This is going to be amazing. They came in. We were winning 21-0 at halftime. Belichick came out of the locker room with these spread formations, running a lot of 11, 12 personnel, or 11 personnel packages, and then 22 personnel packages, and then running the football. And because he was forcing all of our defensive backs on the field, they couldn't stop the run. They put up 253 yards rushing in a single half of football. We lost that game. I know they scored more than 40. That game and it was all keyed by the run. And that's what happens when you sell out to stop the pass. Now, hopefully Sean McDermott's smart enough to know this and just realize we have to play balanced and just try to pick our spots. But if not, then you're right. Raheem Mostert he's the guy then. You could ride him to a victory here on Sunday.
We could. So what's really scary is that you picked 27-24 Buffalo. I'm actually going the opposite direction. I'm picking 27-24 Miami. I thought that this is not going to be as high of a scoring game as before. I think that this is going to be one where it is going to be down to the wire, but I'm not going to say it's a Jason Sanders down to the wire. I think we'll just stop you from scoring. We'll just have the lead to begin with. That's what I'm going to bet on because I have to trust Jason Sanders to win the game. I don't think we're going to win the game. That's just the honest truth.
I'm going to be in the stands on Sunday just watching for Sanders to take the field. Like every time he does, I'm going to be thinking about this conversation.
All right. So in any case, okay, I want you to know this is officially the longest episode of Fins Nation I've ever done. And it's one that I'll give you this. I know why Alf recommended you. You are very intelligent, very fun to talk to. I really appreciate you coming on with me. I really do. So, once again, thank you. And for everybody who's listening, go check out Rockpile Report if you want to get some inside information on the AFC East rivals.
Well, check out the Rockpile Report, but never mind our Bills nonsense, because let's face it, you guys don't care about that.
You never know. It's good spying.
Every week we do a show with 5 Reasons Sports' Elf Artiaga from 3 Yards Per Carry. We do a joint podcast called the AFC's Roundup, where it's this kind of conversation. There's some snarky banter, there's jokes, there's football talk, and we go over every team in the AFC East and what happened to them that week with a podcaster who represents that franchise. It's a lot of fun. It's a bunch of guys sitting around drinking beer and talking shop. If you guys are interested in that kind of stuff, feel free to check it out. It's the AFC's Roundup podcast at Rockpile Report, anywhere you can find it on Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes Radio, all the podcatchers.
I'm going to have to go and listen to one of those now. All right. So once again, everybody, thank you all so much for listening. If you have not already done so, make sure you go to prizepicks.com, use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. And again, Biscayne Bay Brewing Company, the only brewing company in downtown Miami. We are having another watch party starting at 11:30 a.m. on Sunday. We will be there to watch the game with you. Your first beer is free when you mention 5 Reasons Sports, and hopefully Dolphins fans everywhere who are at that watch party will be able to watch the Dolphins continue their streak. We'll see. Like, this is the first real test, I think, for both teams at this point to see who really is the top dog in the AFC East, because these other teams that we faced, it's just not doing it for me. I'm sorry, Russell Wilson. Your Hall of Fame career may now be in danger at this point.
He should be kicked out of the Hall of Fame running just for that cheesy, that Broncos country, let's ride. He should be thrown, like, you shouldn't be allowed on the ballot for that alone. That alone.
All righty. Once again, thank you all so much for listening. We will see you all next time for another episode of Fins Nation.